At 3:40 in the morning local time, an American maintenance crew at Camp Buehring in northwestern Kuwait had their hands buried deep inside an AH-64 Apache. They were pulling a turbine engine. Standard work on a standard night during a war that had not yet reached this particular stretch of desert. What nobody on that base could have known was that a salvo of Iranian ballistic missiles, launched 8 minutes earlier, was already tearing downward through its terminal arc at 3 times the speed of sound, aimed with cold precision at the helicopter flight line sitting below. At 3:41, the alarm split the night air across Camp Buehring, and soldiers poured from barracks toward concrete bunkers in whatever they happened to be wearing at the moment the siren found them. Out on the perimeter, a Patriot battery's ANM-PQ-65 radar had already painted 5 ballistic contacts on a southeastern bearing, all of them dropping fast. The Patriot's computers sorted the most dangerous tracks and began throwing PAC-3 MSE interceptors skyward in pairs. Each one carved a white exhaust trail across the desert floor that strobed the sand like lightning. PAC-3 MSE interceptors closed on the inbound warheads at combined speeds exceeding Mach 6, each one steering itself toward its target through an active Ka band seeker and 180 attitude control motors firing in fractions of a second. There is no explosive warhead on a PAC-3. At that closing speed, the missile body itself does the killing. It is the rough equivalent of swatting one baseball out of the dark with another baseball, both thrown by major league arms, except both baseballs are traveling at 4,000 miles per hour. 2 objects meet. Neither one walks away. The debris falls as something close to powder. That night it worked on 3 of the 5 inbound warheads. 2 were still coming down as the radar fought to reacquire them. 3 of 5 ballistic warheads intercepted in under 40 seconds, at Mach 6 closure speeds, in total darkness, against targets that had been inbound for only 8 minutes. The crew on that Patriot battery executed everything the system was engineered to do. What was about to hit Camp Buehring was not a failure of that crew. It was a failure of geometry, and the Iranians had spent considerable effort building their entire attack plan around exactly that gap. If you look at the Patriot's ANM-PQ-65 radar face, it does something no other air defense system on Earth can replicate. It searches for targets, tracks them, and guides interceptors all from a single phased array antenna. The radar scans a 90-degree sector of sky, sorting contacts by trajectory and closing speed. Think of it as a security camera bolted to one wall of your house. It covers the front door with authority. But if someone comes through the basement window, the camera is not even pointed in that direction. While the engagement control station had been locked onto those ballistic tracks, processing power pushed to its ceiling, radar sector aimed hard to the southeast. Something else had been approaching from an entirely different bearing for the past 40 minutes. 3 Shahed 136 one-way attack drones had launched from forward positions closer to the Iranian coast, and were now cruising in from the south at barely 100 feet of altitude. On the nose of each Shahed sat a commercial GPS receiver, the same chip your phone uses for navigation, steering 40 pounds of high explosive to pre-programmed coordinates at 100 knots. Wingspan under 3.5 meters. Radar cross-section roughly the size of a large bird. Against a Patriot radar optimized to scan upward for ballistic arcs. A target flying at 100 feet of altitude produces a signature like trying to hear your kids sneaking into the kitchen while someone runs a vacuum right next to your ear. The Patriot was not failing. It was watching the front door while the drones walked in through the basement. $30,000 per Shahed airframe, $4 million per pass, 3 interceptor it flew past. Iran had done the arithmetic. They had done it carefully, and they had done it well. The first warhead struck the helicopter maintenance area at 3:42, and the overpressure wave arrived before the sound did. The blast tore through 2 Apache fuselages sitting on the flight line and folded a section of the hangar roof onto the floor where a maintenance crew had been working 90 seconds earlier. The second warhead found the fuel depot, Jet fuel does not explode the way most people picture, it blooms. A rolling orange fireball expanding outward faster than a man can run, chased by a column of black smoke that drove itself through the pre-dawn sky and was visible from 30 miles in every direction. When the drones arrived, the Shahed that hit the base command building at 3:43 detonated inside the operations center, cutting the base's coordination nerve in a single strike. Camp Buehring was burning. The helicopter flight line that had been servicing Apaches and Blackhawks through 8 straight days of combat operations was now fully engulfed. 400 miles southeast, on Iran's Gulf Coast, the IRGC Navy battery commander who had ordered the launch received confirmation through an encrypted relay and allowed himself 3 seconds of quiet satisfaction before ordering his crew to collapse the Fath transporter erector launcher and begin driving north without delay. Standard IRGC doctrine gives a crew 20 minutes to tear down the launcher and vanish before American intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets can pinpoint the firing position. They were not counting on what came next. Ahmed Al-Jaber Air Base sits in the Kuwaiti desert. For 8 days, F-15E Strike Eagles had been flying combat sorties into Iran from that runway, working over IRGC installations along the coast in methodical sequence. Tonight, Camp Buehring's fires were visible as an orange wash on the northern horizon. Somebody owed the Army a receipt. 4 Strike Eagles, call signs Rage 01 through Rage 04, were sitting on the ramp loaded for precisely this kind of work. GBU, 31J DAM weapons, hung from centerline stations, and GBU 39 small diameter bombs lined the wing racks. Approximately 92,000 pounds of precision guided ordnance distributed across 4 aircraft. The F-15E Strike Eagle, Boeing's 2-seat deep strike variant of the most successful air superiority fighter the United States ever put into production. Twin Pratt and Whitney F-100 engines producing 29,000 pounds of thrust each. Top speed Mach 2.5 at altitude. Combat radius over 1,000 miles with external fuel. Maximum weapons load of 23,000 pounds across 11 hard points. It was designed during the Cold War to fly deep into Soviet territory and destroy things that were not supposed to be destroyable. Tonight it was doing exactly that, just with better GPS and a considerably more personal reason. That is enough ordnance to comprehensively redesign every structure on the target list and still have weapons remaining. All 4 Strike Eagles rolled onto the runway with afterburners lit. Iran had just hit an American base. It had put American soldiers running for concrete in their pajamas. It had put American helicopters, hardware paid for by American taxpayers, on fire in the desert. And somewhere on that ramp, a person wearing a flight suit decided that was a sufficient number of provocations. Each pair of F-100 engines drove 58,000 pounds of thrust through the desert night, the kind of sound that does not negotiate with anyone. Orange exhaust cones stretched 50 feet into the darkness behind them. The desert floor shook in response. 4 aircraft climbing hard and heading northeast, carrying enough precision-guided ordnance to ensure that Iran would remember this particular night without any difficulty. You want to hit our base? We know exactly where you parked. Wheels up at 3:53. The bill was already airborne. The first problem was already waiting on the data link. The ISR feed from the MQ-9 had captured the Fath launchers at the moment of launch, but the IRGC crew had been relocating for 12 minutes by the time Rage flight got off the ground. The coordinates Rage 01 was carrying were already going stale. In the United States Air Force, stale coordinates are a targeting problem. The Strike Eagle sensor suite exists specifically to resolve targeting problems in darkness over hostile territory, while something is actively working to remove you from the equation. But in 30 seconds, that targeting pod was about to locate a vehicle whose crew had no idea they were being observed, because a warm engine has no idea it is supposed to be hiding. the Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod under Rage. 01's fuselage sees heat, not visible light. At 20 miles of standoff, it can confirm that something is radiating a thermal signature, but it cannot tell you with certainty whether that signature belongs to a FAF launcher or a civilian truck making a late delivery. You cannot release a 250-pound bomb on a heat bloom and trust that you guessed correctly. That is how a war produces a headline that benefits no one. Positive identification requires closing the range. Closing the range means flying toward whatever air defense assets are positioned to protect those launchers. One useful piece of information arrived from the orbiting MQ-9, which had tracked the launcher's initial movement for 3 minutes before losing them behind a ridgeline. That tracking data gave the WIZO a search corridor. Not the full 6-mile circle of uncertainty, but a narrower wedge pointing northeast toward a tunnel complex in the coastal hills. The problem contracted. The solution still required getting uncomfortably close. Somewhere on the Iranian coast, an IRGC crew was pushing hard toward a tunnel entrance 4 kilometers north, with a head start measured in minutes. The sniper pod on Rage 01 could see in complete darkness. The crew in the back seat had 92 very personal reasons to find those launchers before they disappeared underground. Rage flight crossed the Iranian coastline at 25,000 feet, just after 4:10 local time. The combined US and Israeli campaign had degraded Iranian air defenses by approximately 90% in the opening week, eliminating roughly 200 systems across the country. But 90% degraded is not 100% gone. And the 10% that survived was precisely the 10% that had been disciplined enough to stay hidden. The TOR M1, NATO designation SA-15 Gauntlet, is a completely self-contained mobile surface-to-air missile system in which each vehicle carries its own search radar, its own tracking radar, and 8 missiles ready to fire, all mounted on a single armored chassis. No external radar van, no separate command post, no data link cable to find and cut. 12-kilometer engagement range, specifically designed to escort mobile missile launchers during relocation. Think of it as a doorbell camera that also mounts a loaded shotgun. It sees you, identifies you, and fires at you, all from the same box on the porch. No wires to locate, no separate alarm panel to disable. And you do not know it is there until the indicator light is already blinking in your direction. Right now, one of these vehicles was sitting between Rage Flight and the FAF launchers. If the WIZO descended for positive identification without addressing the TOR first, a missile would be on its way to his aircraft before the sniper pod finished resolving the image. At 4:12, Rage 01's WIZO picked up a 3-second burst on the ALR-56M radar warning receiver. Think of the ALR-56M as a smoke detector that identifies exactly what type of fire is burning and precisely where it originated. The frequency matched a TORM, one search radar operating in scan mode, and then the signal went quiet again. The Strike Eagles limitation in this situation is straightforward. There is no AGM-88 harm on these jets. If Rage Flight were Growlers or Wild Weasel F-15Cs, that 3-second emission would have been all the targeting data required to remove the TOR from the equation immediately. But Strike Eagles carry bombs and targeting pods, not radar-seeking missiles. The only path to eliminating the TOR is to locate its precise GPS position and place a weapon on that coordinate. The WIZO needed 5 to 8 seconds of continuous TOR emission to build a targeting solution. The TOR commander was giving him exactly 3. Below Rage Flight, the TOR M1 commander watched his own scope and worked in short, deliberate pulses. 4 American contacts at 25,000 feet, tracking inland toward the launchers he had been assigned to protect. His orders were uncomplicated. Keep the FAF launchers alive long enough to reach the tunnel complex. The entrance was 3 minutes of driving from where they were sitting. Going active with fire control radar would likely result in his vehicle being removed from the map in under 60 seconds. Staying dark meant the launchers had zero air defense coverage during those 3 minutes. Either outcome meant someone was losing hardware before morning. The tour commander had 2 options: stay dark and watch the launchers he was assigned to protect, get erased from 15,000 feet, then explain to his commanding officer why he held fire while it happened. Or go active, take his shot, and hand the American Wizzo a GPS coordinate precise enough to address by street number. Rage 01's pilot made the call. He pushed the nose down from 25,000 feet toward 15,000, closing the slant range toward the launcher search area. Not a weapons run, a deliberate provocation. The tour commander's scope would show an American fighter descending directly toward his launchers. If the tour stayed dark, the Wizzo would reach sniper pod resolution and work the FATs without ever engaging the air defense. If the tour went active, its fire control radar would go continuous, and the APG-82 would finally receive its 8 seconds. Checkmate in 2 moves. The tour either watches the launchers get destroyed from above, or reveals its own position, attempting to prevent it. The tour commander chose to fight. He went fully active, fire control radar to continuous track, emissions flooding the airspace. The ALR-56M announced itself in Rage 01's cockpit, with enough urgency to make the pilot's hands tighten. The Wizzo was already working the APG-82 in passive absorption mode, triangulating across 6 seconds of solid signal until the GPS solution locked on the second pass. Here is what the TOR commander handed over when he committed to continuous track. The APG-82's 1000 transmit, receive modules can shift from broadcasting into a pure listening mode, absorbing incoming emissions and triangulating their source down to a GPS coordinate precise enough to guide a weapon. Think of it as locating your teenager's exact position in the house by following the sound of their phone's speakers. You cannot find them if they stay silent. The moment the TOR went continuous, the Wizzo had his address. He designated the TOR's position and released a GBU-39 small diameter bomb off the wing rack at 16,000 feet. It began a silent, unpowered glide toward the last transmission that vehicle would ever make. But the tour was fast. 1 missile came off the rail before the GBU-39 could arrive, accelerating toward Rage 01 at Mach 2.5 from 12 kilometers out. The pilot had 4 seconds of warning on the ALR-56M before things deteriorated rapidly. Rage 01's pilot broke hard, left at 6 Gs, the kind of turn where the edges of your vision fade to gray and your suit inflates around your legs to keep consciousness from departing. The chaff dispenser cycled on its own schedule, throwing aluminum confetti into the slipstream behind the aircraft. The TOR's missile tracked the chaff bloom for 1 critical second. That single second was sufficient for the pilot to drag the aircraft below the SAM's minimum engagement altitude. At 800 feet above the desert floor, the seeker lost its look-down angle and the missile tore overhead. The Wizzo later claimed he heard it pass. He was probably exaggerating slightly. Probably. 7 seconds after the TOR fired its last missile, the GBU-39 reached the coordinate the Wizzo had locked. GPS guidance is indifferent to radar modes and countermeasures. It knows where the vehicle was standing when the solution was built. A $40,000 glide bomb had just removed a $25 million air defense system from the Iranian inventory. Your tax dollars working through the night. The path to the FATs was now uncontested. Rage flight descended to 15,000 feet where the sniper pod's resolution improved immediately. What had been ambiguous thermal shapes at 25,000 feet resolved into crisp vehicle outlines on the Wizzo's infrared display. He swept the search corridor the MQ-9 had defined, working the pod east to west in 30 seconds of methodical scanning before finding exactly what he was looking for. 2 vehicles, engines still glowing hot on infrared, parked nose to tail in a wadi 1 kilometer short of the tunnel entrance. The FAth-313 launch canisters were still mounted on the rails. The IRGC crew had run out of time before they could unload. The Wizzo zoomed the sniper pod to maximum magnification, confirmed the launcher signatures, and understood with complete certainty that he was looking at the same vehicles that had put Camp Buehring on fire 90 minutes earlier. He designated the lead launcher, confirmed GPS lock, and released. 12 seconds of flight time, no motor, no exhaust trail, no audible warning of any kind. The warhead detonated at the junction of the launch rail and the truck chassis, whiting out the targeting pod's infrared sensor for 2 full seconds. When the image returned, the launcher was burning scrap, sitting in the wadi floor. The weapon that erased it was the GBU-39 small diameter bomb. Diamond-shaped folding wings that deploy on release. GPS guidance throughout. 60 nautical miles of unpowered glide range from altitude. A single F-15E carries 8 of them. The IRGC had a $30 million launcher sitting in that wadi. The thing that ended it cost $40,000 and arrived in complete silence. Rage 02 rolled in on the second launcher with the larger instrument, a GBU-31J-DAM, weighing 2,000 pounds. Its tail kit adjusting 4 fins 10 times per second across 30 seconds of silent freefall, steering itself onto a GPS coordinate with an error margin measured in meters. The weapon hit the truck chassis and erased everything within 50 meters of the impact point. The Faths were gone. The Tor was gone. Rage flight turned south toward the Iranian coast and the naval compound where the entire operation had been conceived and commanded. The building where the battery commander had allowed himself his 3 seconds of satisfaction before ordering his people to run. Rage flight rolled in on final. 4 GBU-31 weapons released in sequence across 30 seconds. The first hit the command building, collapsing inward into the room where the battery commander had received his Camp Buehring confirmation less than 90 minutes before. The second struck the communications center. The third punched through the half-meter concrete roof of the fast attack boat shelter and detonated inside, where the overpressure had nowhere to distribute itself. So the walls blew outward, and the roof descended onto the boats below like a closing fist. The fourth hit the fuel depot and sent its own column of black smoke climbing through the morning air, a twin to the column still hanging over Camp Buehring, 350 miles to the north. The IRGC battery commander who had ordered the Camp Buehring strike had been driving north for 60 minutes when the news reached him through a militia radio frequency. His launchers, his Tor escort, his command compound, all of it gone inside 20 minutes of American flight time. He had celebrated for 3 seconds after Camp Buehring. The Air Force's response had taken somewhat longer to prepare, but unlike his attack, they did not leave anything standing.